All right, everyone, let's get started. I've got a lot of content to show you guys today. So we've got a packed agenda, but I will give you guys some time for Q&A at the end. This session is called A Beginner's Guide to Maps. My name is Patrick McKay. I'm a manager in development, and I've been at Tableau for 2 years, and I've been to 3 Tableau conferences. So you guys can work out the math on that. You guys are also really lucky today. I had the foremost expert in geospatial analysis scrub this deck. She went through my terms, my phrasing, gave me suggestions for jokes. And that is my 9-year-old daughter, Lauren McKay. There's my name in big red slide, in case you missed it the first time. That's my email address. I really would like to hear from you guys. Feel free to email me. I will get back to you. I've got a massive stack of business cards up at the front, so I'll be handing those out if you come up front and introduce yourself, and we can network a little bit. So here's the agenda. I've got 4 demos to show you. And I mentioned we have a Q&A, and I'm hoping we'll have 10 minutes for Q&A. There's a lot of content here, so don't worry, this session is being recorded, and the workbook is going to be available at some time after the session. I'm not exactly sure when this material is going to be uploaded to the TC site. But first, we're going to start with the Superstore. So the Superstore is a built-in data set that comes with Tableau. The way you access it is when you start at Tableau, you'll hit this landing page, and all you do is click that button down on the lower left, and the Superstore will load. And the reason I'm showing this is it's just a really easy way to get going with Tableau. It's got mapping scenarios in there built in, so you can start playing right away. You don't have to curate a set or find a good data set. It's a clean data set, and you can concentrate on learning Tableau. This data set is a fictional store across the US, and they sell consumer goods, furniture, kind of hodgepodge of different goods. So let me show you my first map that I built when I started here. That's my first map. And I was really proud of it. I thought it had a lot of great data in there. But what I want to ask you guys this, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being bad, 10 being terrible, sorry, 10 being good, messed up that line already, 10 being good, 1 being bad, how would you guys rate this, go ahead, sir, in the green. Oh, way, way too high. Okay, anyone else? Sorry, anyone else? Come on, don't be shy. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Okay, I'm probably not going to get lower than 1 because I gave you a scale 1 to 10. I actually rate this as a -10 when I practice it. It's a terrible, terrible map. Keith is going to help me here. I'm handing out $5 Starbucks cards here for people getting closest to the answer. Thank you, Keith. Yeah, it's a -10. It's really bad. And I don't know if some of you didn't see this. I labeled it bad. So you know right away, it's a terrible map, right? Yeah, and the gentleman in the green is right. It does show the data, but it's not that effective. It's hard to see. There are negative values in here. If you look at Texas, it's -25,000. This is profit by state on the Superstore. So it's really hard to see what is actually the good profit areas and the low profit areas. And there's another thing here that you may not have noticed. There's missing data here. Can anyone see where the missing data is? Okay, which area though? You guys see? No, on the map. Illinois. Okay, I'll try. Okay, you front guys, you're banned now because I want to make sure people in the back get some Starbucks cards. Keith, would you mind? All right, thanks, Keith. Yeah, Illinois is missing, and it's really hard to see, right? And imagine if it was on the eastern seaboard. You just would not see that missing data. Now, the gentleman over here noticed that there's this one unknown. That's the other UI clue that you have, that there's missing data here. So let me show you how to construct this map. Oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. Let me show you a good map. So here I'm using color, right? Green, the darker the green, the higher the profit. The darker the blue, the lower the profit, or the higher the profit loss. So you can see right away, California, of course, is up there. Washington State's looking pretty good. Texas is terrible. Florida, not as bad. But you can see right away, your eyes know right away where the problem is. And you can also see here, Illinois kind of stands out a little bit more. You see it, you notice it a little bit more. So I'm going to construct both these maps for you guys. So I'm going to clear the worksheet. And over here is the fields in the Superstore. And right here is a hierarchy with country, state, city. And a hierarchy is very purposeful. It's a parent-child relationship. You're going from country to state to city. So if I double-click state, you see the map comes up right away. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take profit and I'll move it on to label. That's not a default action. So I was really worried showing you this, guys, because it's like 2 clicks and you create a really bad map. This is not the default action in Tableau. I'm kind of forcing it to do this. To make it a little bit better, I can move the pill over to the size mark. And now we get something called a proportional map, right? The size of the points are increasing based on the profit. But this isn't a very good map because Texas, remember that was a low profit? You can't see it. So maybe it's missing data, but it doesn't draw your attention. And large negative values you kind of want to pay attention to. So I'm going to move this over to color, and I create that map. So it's an easy couple of clicks. This kind of map is called a chloropleth map. And a chloropleth map just means using color, like areas of color, to denote your values. One interesting thing you can do in Tableau is I can use a proportional map, a point map, and a chloropleth map at the same time. And I'm going to do that by dragging the latitude field. I'm holding down the command key on the Mac. It's Control on PC. And it duplicates that map up and down. And in the marks card here, you can see there's an all card that represents the fields across both. And there's 2 sub-marks cards. I'm going to click the bottom one. And this bottom one refers to this guy here. So I can put something else on. I'm going to remove the profit, and I'm going to put discount. Oops. And now I have a proportional map. My next step is I just want to put these 2 guys together. I want to flatten them on top of each other. And that's a 1-click. It's kind of a hidden feature. It's called a dual axis. Whoops, I went a little bit too fast. I hit that dual axis icon, and it kind of overlays them. And I can increase the size here. So with this information, it might be that the states that give higher discounts are generating lower or higher profit losses. It's hard to tell. It's not completely consistent across everything. Remember, this is a fake data set, but it might show you that kind of trend. And now I'm going to do something maybe a little bit controversial. I'm going to use a pie chart. And I got really strong reactions when I was doing dry runs at the office, when I was getting feedback. Some colleagues were like, no, don't use pie charts. And others were like, that's okay. And I went, I'm doing it because I've been practicing this deck. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to hit this drop down by the marks card. I'm going to hit pi. And then I'm going to take this segment field. I'm going to move it on color. And I can make this a bit bigger so it's a little bit easier to see. So I've got a lot of things going on here. I'm showing profit, I'm showing discount, and I'm showing those discounts broken across the segments. So you have to be a little bit careful with showing this much information. It can be really hard to understand what you're seeing. It's easy for me. I've been practicing this thing for a long time. But for your users, it could be very hard. So be careful not to put too much information, but this is something you can take advantage of. So here's my summary, that Superstore sample. It's a great way to get going. I'm using colors and size to really show off some of the data so it's easy for me to see, or my users to see. I used the dual axis to overlay the chloropleth map with a proportional map. And I forgot to show you the missing values. Let's go back there. Good thing I have this summary. To fix this missing values here, I can hit this for unknown. I'm going to go to edit locations. And when this pops up, I'm going off script a little bit here. Yeah, that's right. This is 10.4 here. So what's going to happen is a dialog's going to pop up, and it's going to say, it's going to recognize that Illinois is spelt incorrectly. I modified this data set to have Illinois only spelt with one L, and I can fix it to be two L's. There's an autocomplete feature. I'm not sure if this is going to come back. There's an autocomplete feature, so you can type Illinois, and once that's finished, it'll just fill in that color. So I'm going to cancel out of this. So yeah, look for those missing values. You've got that little widget on the bottom right. Oh, if everyone could hold questions, I'll answer your questions at the end. And whether they're kind of word or warning, population maps. If I zoom into this area using the zoom area tool, you notice Washington and California are showing really green, but there's a lot of people in California, and people buy a lot of stuff, right? The more people you have, the more stuff that's bought. So you could see this pattern with hats, maybe even umbrellas, even though California is more dry. So you have to be careful of population maps. What you might be indirectly showing is just the population of states. So you have to normalize this data, do a per capita thing. This data doesn't have that in there, but I could find out that Washington is way more profitable given its population size versus California. So that's all well and good. We got some fake data, showed you some fake results. But I thought it'd be interesting to show you some real data. And so what I did is I went to the Las Vegas government site, and they have restaurant inspection scores for lots of restaurants in Las Vegas. So my next question to you is, how many restaurants are in this data set? Unique restaurants. It's the Las Vegas city area. Go ahead, ma'am. Way higher. Who said 10,000? Higher than 10,000? 20. I heard 20 over there somewhere. Keith, the lady over, I didn't quite catch who said it. Yeah, it's 20, oh, thanks, Keith. Yeah, it's 20,000 restaurants. So let's take a look at this data set. So I'm just going to hit this View Data tool. I typically do this just to see what we're working with, and it just gives you a grid snapshot of the first 10,000 rows. So I'm just going to expand it. And you can see there's all kinds of neat information around the address, the category name. If I start scrolling over here, I want to show you at the very end. It's got latitude and longitude, so those are where the restaurants are located, and it's got the inspection demerits. And it has this aggregated, or it has this every time an inspector went, so it goes back 3 or 4 years. So you can see the pattern of how these restaurants have been either doing well or not so well. So the first thing you'll notice is Tableau by default takes those latitude and longitudes and it puts it in the measures. You want to move it up into dimensions. If you use it as is, it'll aggregate all those locations into a central point, and that's not what you want. You know these are Las Vegas restaurants. It's not much use to have it, telling you it's in Las Vegas. When I move it up to dimensions, it'll show me a dot for each restaurant. Now, what's really weird here is there's a restaurant that's in Las Vegas, in New Mexico. That doesn't seem quite right. Same with California. And obviously here, that seems like a bit of a problem, right? I'm not sure if Las Vegas has district, off of Africa. It's a cruise, yeah, that's right. Maybe a floating restaurant. It's a little weird. What this area is called it's called Null Island. And Null Island means the latitude and longitude are both 0. So what that means is, something's gone wrong, the data's missing, so we'll just ignore that. So I'm going to zoom into Las Vegas. So I'm going to use the zoom area tool. I'm just going to start sort of digging into this data. And you can see the airport right here. So I'm going to filter this down a little bit. I'm going to use the zoom or the radial selection tool. And this guy's neat because it'll give you a distance if you see on the right side. So I'm just going to look at restaurants within roughly 5 miles of where we are right now. I'm going to hit keep only, and then all those other points disappear. And if I hit this button here, this kind of resets the map. Tableau knows where these points are. So when I reset it, it repans and zooms in a little bit so those points are contained in that area. And let's do a couple things to fix this set here. So I'm going to put the permit number. I'm going to put the restaurant name. So now when I hover over, you can see the restaurants and the permit number. And my next step, of course, is I'm going to use colors and size, right? And my goal here is to find the worst of the worst, right? These are restaurants you guys should not go to, right? So I'll move inspection demerits onto size. And let's move it onto color. And right away, right, the big red dots are the danger spots. So we want to stay away from those danger spots, right? I'm going to filter this viz now to highlight the bad spots, because there's a lot of restaurants here. Most of them are blue. So you're probably going to be OK, whatever restaurant you go to. So I'm going to take that inspection demerits, move it into the filter area. Going to get some. And I'm just going to hit, I don't know what these demerits mean, FYI. It just seems like 300 is a lot. So I'm gonna do that. And now you see how the viz like repanned and zoomed down a little bit just to contain those points. And there's obviously one that's standing out like a sore thumb. This guy up here, new jumbo. So I don't know what's going on there. It's seafood probably, so that's already a danger sign. What was interesting when I looked at this set, oh, it's not there. There's a lot of Thai restaurants here as well. It's Thai. So sort of what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find out more data about this. So I want to see kind of a history of how these restaurants went per year. But the map viz isn't a very good viz for that. So I'm going to combine this with another viz, and I'm going to connect them together. Let me show you how. I'm going to take the restaurant score, or I have a new worksheet here. I'm going to take the restaurant name. I'll move it on columns. I'm going to take this inspection date. And by default, it's going to stay on year. And then I'm going to take the inspection demerits and move it on rows. And now it's going to give me this chart with all these values over time. Now I'm going to create a dashboard that puts these two elements together. So I'm going to take the map and the restaurant score. And it's going to align it side by side. And it's trying to render the right side. You notice there's this big gray area. This is probably not what you want. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to take all those restaurants and render it in this area. So to fix that, instead of entire view, let's go to standard. And it'll re-render, and you'll see a scroll bar that pops at the bottom, so you can scroll through the values. And finally, I'm going to select the point to filter. I'm going to select the point on the map on the left side, and it'll filter the line chart on the right. And that's an easy step. You just hit this button. And now when I go to New Jumbo, you can see New Jumbos all over the place. I'm not quite sure what happened here. Maybe there was a payoff or something. I'm not sure. But they're not on a good trend back up, right? And we can look at other restaurants here. This one is really interesting, the Little Saigon restaurant. You notice it's been revoked. So I think that might mean they're closed, which is kind of strange because they seem like they're on a good trend. But maybe those 80-ish demerits were really bad demerits, and it caused them to close. I'm not sure. So let's take a look at the summary here. So if you have latitude and longitudes on your set, you can plot them directly in Tableau. I'm using colors and size to highlight the worst of the worst, and I'm linking those vizzes together. I find in my own, when I'm making my own workbooks, I'm always using more than one viz. You can create a much better view of your data. Rather than just having everything on a map, you can combine things and show a better view, and you can add a lot of vizzes into a single dashboard. So back to my daughter. I went home. I showed this to her, and I'm like, Lauren, what do you think? And she went, next demo. So I went to the next demo, a little worried now that my expert isn't going to be so impressed with the rest of the demos. So if you did go to New Jumbo, this is probably where you're going to end up. So I found a medical set that shows just patient outcomes in New York State. It shows, it has categories of different conditions, and it has kind of expected rates. So let me show you the data. Oh, that's the restaurant one. So you can see here it's got sort of the type of condition. It's got a bunch of information here around the zip code. So this data set has aggregated these numbers by 3-digit zip codes. That's a really popular way to aggregate data. 3-digit zip codes are simply the 5-digit zip code, and they've just taken the first 3 numbers starting from the left. And zip codes are organized in a pattern. So you're not going to have 3-digit zip codes that are across the country. They're all right next to each other. If I go over here, you can see this data here. Observed rates, medical hospitalizations, expected rate. So these are predictors and sometimes real values that are coming from this data set. So let me add the 5-digit zip code. I'm going to double click. And you see this comes as points. This is every zip code in New York State. I personally like filled areas when I'm talking about zip codes or states. So I'm going to change it to this map. In 10.4 and previous, this is called filled map. We changed this UI a little bit because of new features coming in. And now you can see we've got all these areas sort of highlighted. So a 3-digit zip code, if I move that onto color, you can see how they're all kind of packed together. There's some kind of weird kind of stuff going on here, but they're close together. And this is how this data is aggregated. So what I want to do is I want to remove those borders. And that's a feature called custom territories. We refer it to data prep, and it means I'm going to relate one field to another so I can break down those barriers. So if I take the zip code, the 3-digit, it's kind of a lot of menus I have to travel through here. I'm going to hit the geographic role. I'm going to do create from, and I'm going to click this button. So watch the mapping viz. It did nothing. What happened over here is it created a hierarchy, and it put that selection, it created this, and it put it in a hierarchy. And it's just like the country, state, city, right? You got the lowest level, 5 digits, and then you got the next level that's 3-digit. So what I can do now is if I hit this minus button, it collapses that, and you can see this area. And this is how the data is actually aggregated. There's another type of scenario for custom territories. It's called Adhoc. And Adhoc is just using a tool to create your own areas that you want. So I'm going to use this rectangular selection tool. And I can just highlight stuff. I can hit this grouping tool, what's that called? A paperclip. And now I can create my own regions. And I'm going to just fill this in. I'm holding the command key here to add it, Control on PC. So now I have 3 new regions that I just drew. And this is very similar to the previous scenario. And now I'm going to collapse those borders. When I created that grouping, it synthesized this field right here. This is a Tableau field. It's not in the database. And it contains all those 3-digit zip codes in this group. If I move that into the hierarchy, you might not have noticed, but this guy, it sort of switched. It now has this guy in it. So now when I collapse that, I get this new region. And Tableau will aggregate the data on that new region. And you can keep doing this over and over and over again as many times as you like. So this was a long spiel. Why did I do all this stuff? Well, I want to remove the observed rate so I can look at it at different levels. So this is the observed rate per 100,000 people. And that's really important because it's normalized, right? We can compare areas directly against each other. So I'm going to move this to color. And I sort of hit maybe a bug. Did anyone notice what happened there? Let me go back. Let me undo. take a look at this color field right here. Right, it just replaced it. So it lost all the original work I did. So to fix that, I'm gonna just move this to detail first. Now we have the borders outlined. And then I'm gonna take the observed rate and move it on to color. So the darker the blue, well, I'm not even gonna explain it because I don't like this color palette, to be honest. This is the default one. So let's just change it. My favorite color palette is the orange-blue diverging. And I'm just gonna reverse the color palette so we can see the higher rates. And you can see it really pops out at you, the red. You know right away, okay, it's this area I need to start looking at to understand. And then I can drill in one. And you can see there's a little tiny red area here. So the data there is dominating. This might be even dominating the entire state, but it's at least dominating that area I had. So I'm going to use that zoom area tool. I'm just going to go into it. So you know it's in Manhattan. So I thought to myself, oh, this is interesting. And I had a little bit of a theory. My theory was that there's going to be more hospitals in the red area than on the non-red areas. So I went looking out there, and I found New York State hospital locations on the internet. So no guarantees they're actually completely right. But I'm going to plot those. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go back to the data source. And this can be intimidating. There's a lot of information going on here. The top part here is the original data. I have two tables that I need to join to get that data to work. And then the bottom here is just a preview. I think it's the first 1,000 rows. So you can kind of see what you're looking at. So I'm going to put one more data set on here. I'm going to take the new spatial file connector. It was released in 10.2. And I'm going to load a shapefile. So the spatial file connector, we support 4 different geospatial formats: shapefiles, KML, map info table, and GeoJSON. And what these formats are is they contain, it's tabular data, so you have fields, and you have location data in it. You'll have points that could represent cities, you have lines that would represent roads, and you'll have polygons that represent countries, states, school districts. And in this one, this shapefile here contains points for my hospitals. And shapefiles deserve a little special mention here. It's the most popular format. It's the dominant format you'll see out there. There's tons of shapefiles out there. If you just type shape in Google, you'll get hit after hit of really interesting shapefiles. But this format also has several required elements to it. You see all these other files? 3 of those are required in the format, and it knows they're required because they have to have the same base name. If you're missing one of these, Tableau will give you an error because we don't know what it means completely. So I'm going to import that shapefile. And the first problem I'm encountered with is how does this shapefile come in with my rest of my data set? And luckily, the shapefile has zip codes in it. So I'm just going to join these using zip codes. And now I get my next problem. My next problem is the data types are different between the two. One's a string and the other one's a number, and you just can't join strings and numbers together. So the way you work around that is you can create a join calculation, and I can just change it in Tableau and say, just make it a string. And now everything kind of is good in the world again. Okay, so something crazy happened. Now this is pro level question here. This is not what I was expecting when I first did it. Does anyone know what happened here? Why did some of my zip codes disappear? So, what was that? Right. Keith, the lady in the back. So what I think you meant was I was doing an inner join. So I'm not going to show zip codes that don't have hospitals in it. And that's not what I want here. So in Tableau, you can select this, and I can do a left, which means show me zip codes whether or not it has hospitals in it, and then put the hospitals in if that zip code has it. So now it re-renders, and everything's back the way we want. So I need to do the last step. I need to add the hospitals in. So I'm going to do the old trick of a dual axis. So I'm going to drag this over. I'm holding the command key. And now I have a top and bottom map. This card represents this map down here. And so I'm just going to remove these fields. So now I have an empty map. And if I look at the hospital data I brought in, you'll see there's a field down there. And it's called geometry. And this represents all those points. It's only able to be used as a measure. And when I drag this over here, all those points come back onto the map. And I'm just going to put the name on detail, just so when I hover over, I know the name of the hospital. And I'm just going to make the points black, just so it shows a little bit better, because now I'm going to overlay them on top of each other. So there we go. But I don't think my hypothesis didn't quite turn out to be true. It looks like the area that on the southwest has more hospitals than that red area. So I was kind of stuck at this point. And I thought, well, maybe the hospitals in the red area are just bigger, more square feet, but I don't have that data. Or maybe this data is being collected by clinics and other facilities that aren't just going to show up in this data set. So I was kind of stuck, but I wanted to show you some other features that can help add more context to this data. And that feature is called background maps. Maps are fundamentally composed of two elements. You have your background map, which is this area over here. It's got roads and lakes. It's not interactable. I can't click it, I can't select anything. And then you have the foreground part, my data, right? All these marks. You need those two elements. And we have extensions and features that let you modify that background map. We have some built-in ones. If I go to map, background, or map layers, there's all these UI areas to modify that. So a good idea is maybe zip code boundaries. I can put place names. So I can just add more context depending on what's important to me. Because if you imagine, if this background map wasn't here, you wouldn't know where this was. I could be really zoomed in, and you just would have no idea. We also have built-in demographic data. There's 30-ish different ways you can look at demographics. If I look at per capita income, you can see it's colored, and I can change the level. So zip code might be a good idea. And I can soften this color on this foreground map. I'll reduce the opacity so you can kind of see it showing through. So maybe it has to do with per capita income. I'm not really sure. But it just gives you an ability to add more context depending on the data that you're showing on the map. We do have extensibility points as well. If I go to background maps, map services, we have two extensibility points, WMS server and Mapbox. And WMS server stands for Web Map Services. Web Map Services, yeah, Web Map Services. And it's just a protocol that returns mapped images. And you might run in this. If you're in a bigger organization, you might have geospatial expertise. And if you do, that group could stand up a server, upload your base map or your background map, and then you could connect to it within Tableau. There's a lot of public versions of this as well. The government has a lot of these up and running. So I'm going to grab one and just show you what it looks like. Let me just get my handy dandy URL. So I just put the URL in. And this is coming from a government WMS server. And you can see it's got a little bit more detail. It's got more color. And you might want to do something like this, or your GIS department might have something more custom for you to use. We have another extensibility point called Mapbox, and they're a partner of ours. And you can sign up for a free account on mapbox.com. They'll give you this long token, and then you can use that token and plug it into Tableau to download either a pre-built map that they've built, or you can customize. If you've got expertise, you want to do something different, you can modify and make your own background map. So I'm just going to show you one of the pre-built ones. Whoops. because I find the Mapbox maps, they're just gorgeous maps. So I'm just going to put my token in here. I'll just call this Mapbox. And they have all these preset styles. And I like the streets view. And it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous map. You know, I can get in further. I can keep going in. And, you know, they have the labels that follow the road. It just looks really, really nice. So that is an option for you. There are limitations with a free account. Obviously, you're not going to be able to upload this to Tableau Public and have thousands or millions of views on it. They will restrict that, but you can obviously pay for it. So I linked a couple data sets together to show an expanded scenario. I was using custom territories. I was using the data prep first to link those zip codes together so Tableau knew what to make of them. I used the Adhoc version of it. I was just using that rectangular selection tool to create these custom regions so I could aggregate things the way I wanted to aggregate them. I used that spatial file connector to bring hospital data in. And finally, I showed a couple different ways you can modify the background map. So I went back home, talked to my daughter about this, and you know, what do you guys think her reaction was when I showed these 3 demos? Boring. Who said boring? All right, right there. Thanks, Keith. Yeah. Yeah. She was pretty bored. So now I'm in trouble. And she rolled her eyes a lot. All my jokes, she rolled her eyes, just like just picture a 9-year-old. So I went back to the office, and I talked to a colleague about this, and he said, I've got the perfect data set for you. It's a data set on a zoo. This is a zoo. Which zoo is this in the US? Does anyone know where this picture was taken? Okay, too easy, so no Starbucks card for anyone. Yeah, it's the San Diego Zoo. So here's a map of the San Diego Zoo. And this is just a picture. This is just a PNG. And so I can do that fundamental thing, right? I can have a background map, and I'm going to overlay points on top of it. And the points I'm going to overlay are the animal locations on top of the map. So let's just show you guys the data. We've got the animal, the birth date, the name of the animal, its sex. This here is really interesting. It's a live webcam. And if I scroll this link goes forever. If I scroll over, it's got these XY positions. And these are pixel locations that correspond to that map. And of course, I've got some weight information as well. So I'm going to start putting the pixel locations on top of the map. So not too interesting so far. I'm going to just use the circle just to darken it. And I'm going to put the animal on detail, just so I can tell what I'm looking at. Now I'm going to put the image on top of it. So I'm going to go to Background Images. I'm going to select the zoo animals. I'm going to add the image. Let me just find the image here. And here it's asking me for how to map this to the XY. So I'm just going to put the dimensions of the picture. And I found out these dimensions by just loading it in like Paint or Photoshop. You can find the length and width, or the width and height, I should say. So I'm going to hit OK. And that's not exactly what I want. It's upside down and it's squished. So to fix this, I'm just going to edit the axis. And I'm just going to tell Tableau what the size is. So it's going to go correct long ways. And I'm just going to hit this reverse button to flip it back over. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of the headers here just so you can see the picture. Now, you can't quite see these marks. So I'm going to make them pink or purple. And I'm just going to size them a bit higher. So there's the polar bear, there's the panda, and all the other, well, I only plotted 4 animals on this. You could do all of them. And now I'm going to create a dashboard. So I'm going to take that zoo, and you see this web page control over here? I'm going to move that over, and it's asking for a URL. I'm not going to put a hard-coded URL in there. And now my goal is, when I select the mark on the top, I want the webcam to load on the bottom. So I'm going to hit Dashboard. I'm going to go to Actions. I'm going to add an action, and there's a URL action built in. I'm going to run the action on Select. Oh, I forgot one step. Let me go back. I need to move the webcam onto detail, so it's made available on that action. And also, while I'm at it, I'm going to fix the tooltip. That tooltip is, pretty useless, and it's a good best practice just to clear up your tooltips. Right, back to the dashboard. Okay, back to where I was, just so I could get this webcam. I went pretty fast there, but that webcam wasn't there. It needs to be on the viz for you to create the action. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to hit OK. OK. So now, I want you guys just to step back a second. I got this demo ready. I brought it home. I showed her this, went through the demo. And I just want you guys to imagine for a second what her reaction was when I clicked on the panda. Please be there. Please be there. Oh, no, I don't think it's there. OK, well, that's the problem with live demos. It was there this morning. It was rolling around, eating bamboo, doing all the things pandas do. Let's try the polar bear. There's the polar bear. No, where's the polar bear? OK, they're all sleeping. OK. We need to do this demo at like 7 a.m. They're always up at 7 a.m. Anyway, she was super excited and surprised. So I guess I became her hero again. All was right in the world. And I wanted to show you that demo. So for the session recap, I showed you the Superstore. It's the built-in sample. I use dual axis in color and size, right, to really highlight the data I want to notice. I then used restaurants, and the key difference there was it had lat longs built in. And I used color and size again, and I linked those Vizzes together just to show more information. Then I went to the hospitals, and I showed you custom territories, the data prep, and the Adhoc versions of that feature. And then I brought a shapefile in so I could overlay those hospitals. And finally, I messed around with the background map. Tableau has a bunch of built-in styles that you can use, plus our 2 extension points. And finally, I showed you Zoo with the background image, with the webcam link, and my daughter was super happy with that. So don't worry, this workbook is downloadable. It will be made available. So if it went too fast, you can download it. Everyone in our group knows what this workbook is. So if you ask someone on the maps team or you get directed to someone on the maps team, they're going to know what you're talking about if you refer to specific slides. I do have a session repeat tomorrow. So tell your family, tell your friends that this was your best session so far, right? Maybe other than the keynote. And that's tomorrow at 11:45. And I wanted to point out our kiosk. We do have a kiosk here in the data playground in that main area. And like I said, all the maps team members have this. We have this workbook loaded on PCs there. So if you have more questions or you want to understand a little bit more what I did here, you can go to that kiosk and people can help you. Some related sessions here, and I've got your agenda figured out for you guys. You don't need to do any more thinking here. Your next session will be mapping tips from a cartographer. That's being hosted by my colleague, Sarah Battersby, and she is amazing. She just knows maps and Tableau inside and out. And she's getting some great tips on what to look for maps, normalization techniques, things you might want to do with choropleth maps. So I really highly recommend that talk. And I throw this next one in. Well, I guess you've got about a 2-hour break, so you do have a bit of an elective there. So feel free to do something else. I thought I'd add this just because dashboards are so powerful, and it's going to be rare that you just use one viz. It's great to link vizzes together. And then finally, there's devs on stage today. I hope everyone's going. My colleague, Kent Martin, is showing some really, really cool stuff. Like, this is mind-blowing stuff related to maps in Tableau at that keynote. So, if you're not going, you got to change your mind. There's some amazing features we're working on right today for you guys. Here's my session survey. Some bad news here. It's kind of difficult to use the app. So once you find my app, just swipe down that right side, and then you don't have to think about anything else. You just hit submit, and you're done, right? And finally, it's Q&A. We've got 15 minutes for Q&A. So I invite everyone to come up to the front. My colleague, Brett Weber, is here. He's going to help answer questions so we can kind of divide and conquer. And finally, thanks, Keith, for doing that. Here's a Starbucks card for you. Thanks very much. And that's my session. Thank you very much.